Have you ever met someone who looks fine on the outside, but is falling apart on the inside? Deadlines piling up, pressure weighing down, eyes so exhausted they can't hide it. Yet when you ask, they still smile and say, I'm fine. I can handle it. Sound familiar? Maybe. That person is you. And if just that sentence made your chest tighten a little, then you may have touched a truth you've been quietly avoiding for years. This video won't just talk about not asking for help, but will go deeper. Why you choose silence, what in your past taught you that relying on others is dangerous, and what the real cost is of always having to be strong on your own. If you want to truly understand yourself or someone you can't quite reach, stay until the end, because what comes next might change the way you see all of this. And before we begin, if you're interested in deep psychological content like this, make sure to subscribe and follow, because every video here is built on careful analysis and synthesis to bring you valuable and responsible perspectives. And that's where things start to become much more complicated than what outsiders can see. Because from the outside, you look like a strong, independent, reliable person, someone everyone can lean on. But on the inside, you're not just handling it, you're stuck in a mechanism that you yourself no longer remember when you learned. It's no longer a choice, but a reflex formed very early on when opening up once led to silence, absence, or worse, hurt. Notice this: the human nervous system doesn't care whether you are right or wrong, it only cares about what helps you survive. If in the past, expressing your needs led to being ignored or made to feel like a burden, then your brain records a very clear rule: needing others equals danger. And from there, you begin to build a version of yourself that needs no one. Not because you don't want connection, but because you've learned that connection is a risk. The problem is that strategy once worked. It helped you avoid disappointment. It helped you avoid waiting for someone to show up, only to be disappointed when they didn't. It helped you maintain control in a world that may have once felt chaotic. But over time, that very strategy begins to backfire, because the life of an adult is not designed to be lived alone. No one truly grows in complete isolation, no matter how capable they are. What many people don't realize is that not asking for help is not just a behavior, it becomes part of your identity. You're not just someone who doesn't ask, you're someone who always handles everything. You're the strong one. You're the one who doesn't cause trouble. And when something becomes your identity, changing it is no longer simply about doing things differently, but feels like you're threatening the very image you've spent your whole life building. That's why, even when you rationally know that others may be willing to help, you still don't do it. Not because you don't understand, but because the feeling of having to say, I need help, is almost unbearable. It comes with a very deep fear: fear of being judged, fear of being rejected, fear of being seen in a way you've spent years trying to avoid. And sometimes the biggest fear is not that others won't help, but that if they do, is the entire belief that I have to do everything on my own will collapse. In relationships, this creates a very painful paradox. You give a lot. You are always there, always supportive, always listening, but you rarely, or almost never, allow yourself to be in the opposite position. And at first, that may make you feel safe, because when you are the one giving, you don't have to face vulnerability. You control the situation. You are the one who is valuable. But over time, an imbalance begins to appear. Not because others don't care, but because they don't know what you need. You've taught them that you need nothing. And when your needs aren't met, not because they refuse, but because you never express them, a quiet feeling starts to build, a sense of being abandoned, even though no one actually left. This is one of the most subtle forms of loneliness, because it happens even when you are surrounded by relationships. The cruelest part is, the better you play the role of being fine, the more others believe that you truly don't need help. And in doing so, you unintentionally become invisible in your own struggles, not because you are unworthy of care, but because you have been too successful at hiding the opposite. There is an important truth that few people talk about. Understanding the cause does not automatically solve the problem. You can recognize all of this, you can nod because it resonates with you, but the next day you will still react in the same old ways. That's not failure. That's how deep patterns work. They don't change through awareness alone, but require new experiences that are safe enough for your nervous system to begin updating. And that kind of change rarely comes from big dramatic moments. It comes from very small things, almost insignificant. One time you say, I'm a bit overwhelmed, instead of staying silent. One time you accept help without immediately trying to repay it. One time you let someone see that you're not perfect and realize that they are still there. At first, these moments may feel uncomfortable, even anxiety inducing, but it is within these small, repeated experiences that something new begins to form. Evidence that needing others does not lead to collapse, that you are still you, even when you don't do everything on your own. And more importantly, that connection does not always come with the kind of risk you once believed. It's not a fast journey, and it certainly isn't an easy one, but it is a real journey. And if you've made it this far, if you recognize yourself in these words, then maybe, just maybe, you've already begun to take the first steps. There is a deeper layer to this story that many people have never touched, and that is sadness. Not the kind of sadness that is obvious and easy to recognize, but a quiet, lingering kind that has almost blended into the way you exist. It is the sadness of a younger version of you, someone who once tried to reach out, once hoped someone would listen, once believed that their needs were valid, but didn't receive that. It may not have been one big event, but many small moments repeated, being ignored, dismissed, or simply having no one truly there. And over time, you stopped calling it hurt. You started calling it normal. But your body does not forget. Your nervous system still carries that memory, not in words, but in sensations. That is why when someone offers to help you today, your first reaction is not relief, but tension. Not because you don't want help, but because a part of you still believes that needing others will lead to disappointment. And until that memory is acknowledged, not just intellectually, but through real emotional experience, the old strategy will continue to operate. This may sound paradoxical, but in order to change, you cannot simply eliminate that extreme self-reliance mechanism. Because at some point in your life, it saved you. It helped you stand when no one else did. It gave you a sense of control when everything around you felt uncertain. And so, before you can let it go, you need to look at it with a certain level of respect, not to continue living by it, but to understand that it is not the enemy. It is simply an old solution for an old situation. One of the biggest barriers here is identity. When you have spent decades becoming the person who needs no one, change is not just about learning a new skill. It feels like rewriting the definition of who you are. And that always comes with a fear. If I am no longer the one who handles everything alone, then who am I? Will I become weak? Will others see me differently? Will I lose the respect I have built? But there is another perspective that few people are taught. The ability to receive is also a form of maturity. We often celebrate giving, sacrificing, helping others, and yes, those are valuable qualities. But if you can only give and cannot receive, then that is not balance. It is a one-way system where you are always in the position of having to be strong. And the truth is, no one can sustain that forever without paying a price. Let's return to a very familiar situation. You are at work, and the workload exceeds your actual capacity. A colleague notices and offers to help. Logically, this is a positive thing, but the feeling inside you is completely different. A tension appears almost instantly. A small voice whispers, "If I accept, what will they think of me?" And before you can think further, you have already declined. You say you're fine. You keep working. And then, hours later, you are exhausted. What is interesting here is that a sense of pride still exists, even while you are tired. A part of you feels that you have done the right thing, that you have maintained the image, but another part feels empty, even slightly resentful, not necessarily toward others, but toward the situation itself. This is a sign that you are living inside a story that was written a long time ago, a story where needing help means that something is wrong with you. And if you have never questioned that story, you will continue to live by it unconsciously. Not because you choose to, but because you have never been shown an alternative. Many people were never taught that their needs are valid, that saying, "I need help," does not reduce their value, but instead is an expression of awareness and connection. You cannot practice something you have never been taught. But the good news is, like any pattern, this can be changed, not through one big decision, but through small, repeated experiences. Each time you allow yourself to receive support, even in a very small way, you are sending a new signal to your nervous system that there are endings other than disappointment. Each time you do not collapse after being helped, you are rebuilding a new belief that you are still yourself, even when you don't do everything alone. The strength you have developed is not fake, it is real, and it deserves to be acknowledged. It has brought you to where you are today, but perhaps it is time to see it in a different way. Not as a destination, but as a bridge that helped you cross a difficult phase, but not a place where you have to stay forever. Because the truth is very simple, even if it is sometimes hard to accept. You were not made to carry everything alone. No one can do that without paying a price. And the people around you, those who may have been willing to help, they have not disappeared. They are still there. It's just that you have become so good at not needing them that they no longer know when to step in. And maybe instead of continuing to try to be stronger, what you need to learn next is not how to endure more, but how to allow more.